Hello, welcome back to Thoughtbot's AI in Focus, the semi-weekly show where we do real live development, usually with a AI tool or focus or adding an AI feature to an existing product. And today I'm joined by the amazing, the wonderful Kasper Timm Hansen. Kasper, thanks for joining me.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Kasper is former Rails core contributor, amazing number of incredible contributions to Rails over the years. And so thank you so much for everything you've done for the community.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah.
And today we're planning on using one of the gems that you've created, ActiveJob Performs in our work. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Looking forward to that. Yeah. See how it fits in and everything. So that's going to be interesting.
We have the work we're going to be doing, which I'll give an overview in a little bit. But we're monitoring, we're live on LinkedIn and YouTube and Twitch, and we can see the chat for all of them. So if you have questions, comments along the way, if we get stuck and you think you might know the path forward, definitely help us out. And if you've got any questions for myself or Kasper about, whether what we're working on or just things in general, we're more than happy to get those questions. So for folks who've watched the stream before, Thoughtbot has an internal application that we work on called Hub. And that it's it's called Hub because it's like the hub, and it mostly integrates with a lot of external systems, our CRM, and you can see over on the left-hand side here, it has messages and our company handbook. It helps us with hiring. It manages our schedule and that kind of thing, and it talks with APIs, a lot of things. So one of the things it does is it syncs to our CRM. One of the things we've worked on the stream before is we have these CRM records of like a project we might do with somebody, and we were working on automatic summarization of all of the information for that project, so that someone, an individual Thoughtbot team member could just land on the page and not have to read through all the comments and everything to get the full context. So what we're going to be doing today is, so it's a little meta here. I've set up a test CRM entry that is for Thoughtbot. And what we're going to be doing today is, one, exploring whether it's going to provide good results, but I'm pretty confident that it is. So seeing uh, uh, what kind of information ChatGPT will return about the companies that we're talking to. So things like the year it was founded, how much money they've raised, who the leadership team is, like things that might be useful when you're talking to a potential customer. And there are products out there that this is the entirety of what they do, like, or pretty much. Like there's a service called Apollo. There's a service called Clearbit, which is actually um, uh, um, one of the founders of that was a previous Thoughtbot developer, went on to make Clearbit, and then that was acquired by HubSpot a couple of years ago, I think. That's pretty much all that what they do. So it's really interesting that these LLM products can sort of do that, or we're going to find out if it does. And so, Kasper, before we begin, I'm curious, how have you been using, have you been doing any AI development, or how have you been using any sort of AI editors or anything in your work?
Not a ton, actually. I know there's a lot of like hubbub about it, well, hubbub for help, but yeah, I still haven't really dived into any of that stuff. I am using SED for some reason, but I know they have a ton of that like agentic stuff or whatever, but yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
just have never really turned it on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And
yeah,
what editor do you use on a regular basis?
it's SED, CED, yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. So just so you know, I have Vim key bindings on. It just occurred to me that is that going to be okay, or should I remove them?
No, I think it's gonna be all right. I still remember some of it. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Just explored it a few times. Yeah.
I just, it's just second nature, so I forget that I have them on. Okay. So let's jump over to the code. This Rails app is a fairly up to date Rails app, but we've been working on it internal at Thoughtbot for probably over 10 years now. But it's up to date. So if we go over to the code, we do have some existing LLM functionality, but let's just start with the page that we're looking at here. This is an opportunity model, so
Mhm.
it's an opportunity model. This is the model. It's has the different stages that it can move through, and it belongs to a client after it's a one project. We have several teams at Thoughtbot that work on different kinds of projects. So it has a primary team. Um, and then those comments and contracts and all those kinds of things. So if we go over to the schema, just to give a sense of, so there's but this is sort of like a record that holds a lot of potential information. And I don't know if you've ever, when you're architecting a system, this is an example I often use. When you like have an order record and um, you you might have an address that order is being shipped to, and it's second nature to like introduce an address model that's associated with the customer who's placing that order. And when you then that customer goes and edits that order, edits their address a year later because they moved, you don't necessarily want that, if you go back and look at that order that they placed a year ago, to think that you shipped it to their new address.
Yeah, yeah,
So you end up duplicating what the original fields were for that order, sort of on that order or on that model, and you make it immutable in a lot of ways. Well, these
yeah.
opportunities are similar, where we have the data of what things were at the point of time that we were having that conversation, and those fields are on the opportunity itself. But then once it becomes a real client and those kind of things, there is actual associations that get then built and maintained for the future of what that was. So you can see, for example, like there's a field called client location. That's a string field on here. And that gets populated at the time of we're having the conversation because it's important at that point. But that, there'll be eventually be a full client record with the up-to-date fields that are maintained beyond the point of the conversation. Another one is even just the name of the person we're talking to, his contact name. And we have fields for company industry, company type, total funding, annual revenue, and those get filled out by people now as we discover them or we look them up. And so what we're hoping to do today is to automatically fill out some of those fields if we can get the information from LM. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Cool.
I always find this kind of stuff interesting, that with like this early life cycle stuff of something, like you're saying, that starts as an opportunity in this case, and it can become a client. But it's the same thing sometimes with like user invitations for like an app where it's, you can only be signed in or whatever. And it's always like, should I try to reuse this? Like you're talking about the address, or should I just make them like almost these just fields on one model? And then you get into this weird state where it's like, well, I could potentially share some code, but I also don't want to give it that attention at this stage because it's so early. So it becomes this like weird mix of like, I always find it interesting. You have to consider like the boundary of a system where you got this like thing that's just at the edges and you want it to come in, but then you won't want to use the stuff that's in the core of your system, like potentially like an address or whatever, because suddenly you're mixing things, but you still need some of that functionality at that edge. So it's like,
and
I've
being
never found a good
comfortable with
answer
that
for it, but it is
level of
kind of this interesting
duplication
state.
is
No, go ahead, Chad.
finding the right balance is a little tricky. I also, to be perfectly honest, early in my career, learned that I use the order and address example because I built a long time ago, built a system where I didn't realize that, and was, I always get confused. Is it normalizing or denormalizing? Had an address model, and then we realized, oh, customers are editing these, and it's changing. We have no record of where the order was originally shipped. So, yeah. So when a new opportunity comes in, that
Adrian says denormalizing in the chat.
Yeah.
Right.
So just generally speaking, and I say this even though there are callbacks here, we generally have, especially over the years, moved into a position where we try to limit the number of callbacks we have in our Rails apps. I don't know. I see lots of nodding from you, Kasper.
It's just yeah. It's kind of, I go a little bit both ways sometimes. Where it's like, yeah, sometimes it could be a callback. Sometimes it can also be something you really run into a ton of issues with down the road, because like, oh, the context that it was written in suddenly is no longer valid or whatever, or it suddenly the model grew an extra kind of part responsibility, just made more sense to keep in there. And then, like, at least what I see sometimes when people really struggle with callbacks is because they're kind of missing an extra active record model where the life cycle is clearer. Is usually what you want for callbacks is a really clear life cycle and understanding of what it goes through, and then they generally seem to make more sense. At least that's been my experience. But
and you also just lose control. Like if everything is being done as callbacks, then you end up, well, okay, what if we don't want the callbacks called this time? And it gets really sort of out of your control at that point. You need to start hacking a bunch of stuff. So for this application, what we've done is we have there are some callbacks here where it's about massaging the data that's being created, and then some after commits where we're updating associated things that need to happen. But you can see, but it's all about the data in the system. Anything where like work is being done or business logic of what happens when a new opportunity is created. In this application, we have a job that is called opportunity processor. And what that's doing now is it takes in the opportunity and it does a few different things. It checks, it updates the source field from the how did you hear about us field, which is, yeah, we don't need to get into it checks to see whether it's spam or not. And if it is, it marks it as spam. And then we use Apollo now, which is one of the services to enrich the opportunity. In theory, this functionality we're going to do today could eventually expand to replace Apollo, that functionality. And then it calls notify external services, which is another class which is specifically notifies external services about the opportunity. In this case, if it's creation, it adds it to the CRM, the external CRM system, and then it notifies people who should know about that new opportunity, which are the salespeople, about it in Slack. And then finally, in all cases, what it does is we create a folder for that opportunity in Google Drive. So we have a shared folder automatically for any documents and contracts and everything that would get created for that. So that we have these two sort of, I guess for lack of a better word, like service objects, although this one's a job and this one's just a plain Ruby object, which this does the internal stuff for processing a new opportunity. And then after all that internal stuff is done, the external notifications and stuff happens. So that's the layout of the structure that we have for that. So in terms of where this functionality slots in, I think it would be in this here, and I'm realizing now as we look at this for the. I've thought about what we're going to do today, but I haven't done it yet. I'm not doing this for the second time. We do have this overlap, this concept of opportunity enrichment, where we're using Apollo to do some stuff. Let's just bounce over there to refresh my memory about what that's doing. So actually, this Apollo service is providing industry information. And then oh yeah, look. So actually it's getting the industry, city, total funding, last funding round, annual revenue, the website technologies. So that's interesting. I'm reacting a little bit on the fly here. I forgot that there was so much overlap between what we were trying to do today and what Apollo is currently doing for us. So if we reframe what we're actually doing is we're actually almost seeing whether we can replace Apollo with a ChatGPT call instead. In some ways that's cool because we can compare the expectations and the results and we have a code structure in place for swapping out the service. So currently, we have an Apollo AI service, and we're calling enrich contact on that. And that method is doing a call to Apollo to fetch that information. And then it gets a hash back of the company data and calls build attributes with that to assign the attributes. So we can mirror this functionality with a ChatGPT call where we can so a lot of people, if you've just experimented with ChatGPT before, you may have experience like writing a prompt and getting text back. But ChatGPT and a lot of the other LLMs now have a JSON mode or a function calling mode. They're related but different, where you can actually reliably get back formatted data as a hash or that kind of thing. One of the really cool things about that technique is that I've found, and people have found in general, that by asking for structured data, the LLM almost gets more reliable and also hallucinates less, because what we do with this technique is we basically say respond using this JSON schema format, and it forces it to fill out the JSON schema, but you can give one of the options as like unknown. So you can enumerate, here are the possible responses that I want, and if it doesn't fit one of the 4 or 5 or whatever the possible options are, then say unknown. The other thing you can do is you can say, okay, I want funding level, right? Which we're not going to be able to know every single possible funding level, but we want to know whether it's making it up or not.
Yeah.
And so we can actually say, well, give me the funding level, but also this other attribute in our schema is the confidence level that you have in that. And we can say that is a number between 0 confidence and 100% confidence. And we'll force the LLM to tell us, basically, are you making up that number or not? And these are techniques that, sort of make the data more consistent and reliable. So I think we can do that here. So we can basically work to replace the Apollo AI service with a class that calls out to ChatGPT instead and gives us back data hash with the with this data, with these fields that we're expecting. How does that sound?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's look at the specs for and just want to get a sense for how these specs are written. So how the specs are written is we're building a hash of enrichment data, and then we're stubbing the Apollo service to return that hash. And then so then we have the Apollo service. So what I'm looking for is, I was just trying to autocomplete the specs for this file, and so there's no, I'm not seeing specs for this file. But that also may be, so this is app services, Apollo AI service. So spec services. Let's jump over to, this is the kind of thing where I really think we would have written specs for this. So I'm spec services. There's not an Apollo folder.
Interesting. What I tend to do in these cases is just grab the Apollo AI service name and then search for that in the spec folder.
Yeah, cool.
Is there any explicit mentions of this at all, or
yeah, good.
it's just
Good
not
idea.
following that naming convention? Oh, and then we got okay, all the allows. Okay, yes, it seems like there's not any.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, well, we're going to be replacing that anyway. But that's interesting. I wonder, well, I'll have to look into that more. Well, why we don't have specs for that class. That's interesting. I'm looking at the code. Yeah. Okay. Well, good. So, note to follow up on afterwards why we don't have specs for that class. But that being said, we're going to write a I didn't mean to close that. We're going to write a replacement for this class. Now it's occurring to me in the back of my mind that I originally thought we were going to introduce a job. And so and I do want to look at ActiveJob performs. So remind me if we after we make a little progress on this to go back up to the job level and talk about that.
For sure.
Okay, so we have this is the so based on what you've seen, I'm just pausing. Where a good entry point into this is.
Yeah, one thing I'm actually still, I think I'd like to see is if there was in the job, there was also like a perform if enabled Apollo. I feel like that's kind of interesting just to double check on as well. maybe before we get deeper into.
Yeah. So the reason why we do this is, this is something that we introduced. It's for this app. This app interacts with a lot of third-party services, and not all of them have sandbox environments.
Mm,
And so on staging, we either need to not have the credentials there, or so that it's not talking to the real environment, or disable it. And we actually like over the years that we didn't used to have the ability to disable it. It would the code would like have ad hoc ability to disable it, like, oh, I don't have an API key set, so then I'm not going to
yeah.
run. But then like someone would forget about that, or it would accidentally get an API key set on staging or locally running on someone's computer. They're they load the API key locally so that they can test some stuff. Then they forget and they leave the app running and they start clicking around. And then you have local data with IDs and that matches production, triggering updates against external services and saying like, update opportunity 123 in our CRM with this fake test data.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we introduced this code, which can basically it's a shortcut for checking whether like having environment variables specifically to enable or disable every external service that might that we talk to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we're only talking to this service if it's explicitly enabled.
Yep. Makes sense. Yeah. Also, just noticing, it is Adrian in the chat was saying, could it be that the Apollo service is not an actual service, i.e., a module without any instance data? And that seems right from what I saw in the service, that it was making that API call, but then just returning that whatever
Yeah.
JSON it was immediately.
Yeah. So the opportunity enrichment service currently is the thing that talks directly to Apollo. And so if we go over to those specs, that's where the enrichment data and the Apollo service and the response from it is stubbed out. So we could ask ChatGPT to respond with exactly this structure. But I'm not feeling that for some reason, because there's a lot of information here which what we're concerned about is the organization, not the person. Here.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to get too hung up on exactly the right place to do this, because this also is sort of a initial. Speaking of which, you've been an active proponent recently of something you're calling riffing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's we're sort of facing one of the things is like, sometimes when you have an idea or whatever, you can get a little stymied by working within a full existing application and finding the right point and like exactly and so you want to talk a little bit about how riffing is different?
Yeah. So it is kind of for stuff like this where it's like I tend to use it when I don't quite know what it is I want or where to start or whatever, or then I can get really hung up on like the correctness and like satisfying the spec and everything like that. But then what I find is that I end up just like and sort of shutting down a bit and just
Right.
being like, but it's not correct yet, and then I can't fit my way through it. So I tend to open up a scratch file now and then just write stuff out as it like comes and then like start refining it over time as well. Um, and I find that that's weirdly really helpful to just think through things or like start breaking down a problem and seeing, oh, we might need this at some point, and then it develops really organically.
Hmm.
And then I have a lot more of a sense of, oh, here's what we're doing, like end to end essentially. I have an overview over it, and then you could also share that with like coworkers essentially. So that's kind of the overall gist of it, as kind of a way to um, approach things and problem solve a bit. It's a little bit different in this case because I think we got most of the organization around it. It's a little different where, like, where I find it really useful to do this riffing is when I don't know what the names for things are and what the relationships are, like actor record models, and how's the flow gonna go through this. And I kind of want to see that a little bit end to end at least, just to see, does this make sense? And then I can continually drop into business logic and see like, oh, sort of prove it out a little bit. See, does this still hold up? And if it doesn't, I can backtrack and
Hmm.
then haven't mucked with things like I've skipped migrations and like even testing for a little bit, and then also separate files as well, just because it makes it a lot easier for me to change my mind and play around with things and see, can I come up with a better name or something, and then shift the naming a little bit to see it'll provoke something else, and then that connection can be valuable even if you don't end up using that. So it's just a lot of like
Yeah.
mental, hopefully beneficial gymnastics. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a workshop that you're running soon
Yes.
about this, right? Where can folks go to find out more about that?
Yeah, it's posted on my social media, and if it's on Luma, probably it's like luma.ma/KASPTH. Do I post it in chat or something?
Yeah,
Let's see.
we can
Probably should do that. Let me find it here. Oh, click the wrong thing. Oh,
I brought it over to the chat.
perfect. You have it there.
Oh, I don't have the
Cool.
URL handy. Um,
Okay. The chat, whatever on the studio. Let's see if we can find it. That should
I
work.
gotta paste.
That's the private chat. Okay,
Oh,
flipping over to comments. There
yeah.
we go. Join the chat, please. I need to connect YouTube. Okay.
If you
Perfect.
paste the URL, I can. Oh, you did it in the private chat.
Yeah,
Awesome.
private chat. Yeah.
Okay.
Have the event
Cool.
on there and subscribe to other things as well.
Sweet. Okay, so inspired by that, what I'm gonna do is I want to break through this block that I'm feeling about exactly how where I know what we need to do to implement this, but what exactly the format of the data is, where exactly it's going to hooked in, I need to break past that. So I'm going to suggest that we introduce like an LLM enrichment class. We just start writing that or some specs for that, which the responsibility of that class in my mind is it's going to um, take a company name and try to give us a bunch of information for it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so let me create a branch here. Um, okay, so that'll be uh, uh, we'll just put it at the top level service now. I realize
There's an extra E in enrichment right there.
thank you. Oh. I don't know. I always do that. I forget. I like in my mind, I'm seeing capitalization that makes sense, and then I go to do it. I'm like, oh, that's not going to work.
Yeah. And then we have to add an inflection on like LLM enrichment to then like
Yeah.
look it up and yada yada. But yeah.
Okay.
We were only concerned with organizations at this stage. Was that sort of it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So, with a organization name. So I think the API for this capitalization is really going to bother me, but see, this is one of the things I struggle with, Kasper. I'm curious about your take on it. I want to write classes like this where you initialize them with all the data and that kind of thing, but then I just end up making a class level method that's a shortcut for doing that.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, well, should I just be creating the class level it as a class level method to begin with?
Yeah, I'm not really settled on that either because it's always just the same thing with ballots and everything, where it's like I kind of want it as an instant message. It feels a little bit better because then you can like add some private methods if you want to and break things up a little bit more. But then from the call side, it is like, well, this probably looks like a class method. Like it could be your LLM enrichment dot enrich and then pass in the name, and then we're kind of done from the call side.
Right, exactly. Then that's exactly what I was going to write right here, where so I think this is what we were saying. So we'll start simple on this first. I'm curious. Pyreal77 says these days I just init the class and call the method on the instance. Yeah. That's what I was doing in here. You can see that's what it's doing. So I feel like I need to update the doc string for this because I wrote it is initialized with an organization name, and I think it says can and provide enrichment data from an organization name. I think that's probably a better way to do it. Okay. Was it founding date?
Do you want to do founded on? Not to make just to like spin our wheels on like naming or whatever. Sometimes there's like a Rails has like an implicit convention here, which like people know about created at and updated at, but there's also a date version of those, which are then called created on and updated on. And
I'm a big stickler about that. And it recently came up a few months ago, came up in Slack, and I was like, no, that's like in the guides. Like, and turns out the guides are not as strict about that as I thought that they were.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, found it on. I don't know that realistically we're going to get, and it might be just be founding year, but
Yeah,
let's see what we can actually get back from the LLM. We are coming up on our anniversary.
nice.
Uh, on July 2nd. No, wait. June 2nd. And well, let's do one more piece of data. What do we want to start with? We can do funding level. Okay. So so what's eventually going to happen here is we're going to need to make a call to ChatGPT. Let's start. I don't know that this is where we would end up, but the fastest path to a working spec at this stage is going to be to we have we're using the Ruby OpenAI gem, so we can say like, okay, when this call happens, respond with this information.
Nice. Yeah.
So let's start with that. Although it's going to be, I wouldn't be comfortable finishing with that level of. And actually, I have the docs for the gem here. So the and we have an existing prompt model while I'm thinking about it in the class, but this prompt only does prompts and returns the text, not structured data.
Mm,
So this can provide an example of how to talk to OpenAI, but it's not fully what we're going to do here. So it's OpenAI client new. I turned myself around here. To receive new and return client, and then the client is. I'm putting back what I just had. And return client, allow client. So the call signature for that, I had it over here. So it's going to be a chat method, and then it's going to take some parameters, the model, the message, and then the tools. And tools are function calls, basically. So you can say like, "Hey, ChatGPT, I know how to do the something. In this case, it's getting the current weather." And so you can say like, I in my system, I have a function for getting the current weather. It is called get current weather. it takes and you give it a JSON schema to describe the arguments. So ChatGPT, when it detects, hey, someone's asking what the weather is, it says, oh, I know how to find out what the real-time weather is in a place. They've told me that there's a function for doing that. So it responds with a call to that function. It builds the arguments matching the JSON schema format and the function name. Now, there's and you can envision a scenario where it's not just one function, it's a bunch of different functions that you're making available to ChatGPT. So in this case, it's implemented as a case method. It's looking at the names of the methods being called by ChatGPT and it's saying, oh, that matches one of the ones that I know how to do. I'm going to call it in Ruby with the arguments that were given to me by ChatGPT. And then I respond with the result of that method. So there's two ways of going about this kind of functionality where you want structured data from OpenAI. One is you can just tell OpenAI, respond using this in JSON using this format and give it a JSON schema and it'll respond. The other way is you can say, I have this function that takes these arguments, and then you just don't do anything with it's going to call the function, but then you just don't respond with any results but you're getting structured data from the arguments of that function call. So, so I think we'll use the that second method is feeling right to me. So to receive chat and return if we go over to the OpenAI docs will give us the JSON format. So this is not the API docs. So the response, the example they always use is the weather. The response is this type function call. It's given an ID and a call ID so you can identify, because it's asynchronous a lot of the times. And then the name of the function that ChatGPT wants to call and the arguments there. So in our case, the ID and the call ID aren't going to matter. We'll call it enrich organization.
An extra C in there. Enrich.
And the arguments. And then we need to call, this is a JSON object that is the argument. So called, I'm doing this as a hash here. Okay. So this isn't going to pass. Obviously, we haven't written any of this code. So expected the file to define the constant LLM enrichment. It doesn't. We and obviously I'm just typing. So if you, Kasper, if you have any thoughts along the way, feel free to interject.
Yeah. When I tried to explore more and more in like doing these kind of objects here of basically using data objects for that stuff. But that's also another, speaking of balance that we talked about earlier, that's also the place where, because data objects are frozen in Ruby, it's kind of like, well, okay, so I can't add any other instance state, which is both, a curse and a blessing. It's nice that you can't add an extra instance state, but then sometimes you want it to. So then it gets really easy to just like turn the data object off or convert it into a struct or something. I'm like, well, now I'm back to square one in a way.
Yeah. Oh, that is interesting. In this case, we don't currently have any instance data except or instance state, sorry.
Yeah, besides the organization name. Yeah.
Right. So how would you write that using a data object then?
Yeah, space there, and then an inherit or less than symbol, and then data.define, and then a symbol of organization name. Define, yeah. Oh, and it has a, yeah, okay.
And that allows you to get rid of the initializer.
Yes, and you get an add a reader as well for that instance state. And then there's some extra method as well. You get like you could technically do an LLM enrichment.with and then pass a new organization name. And in this case, that wouldn't really matter that much. But there's sometimes that's like in the documentation, they're using, I think it's like, what is it, like something like coordinate system, so an X and a Y. So sometimes you could do a point in a coordinate system, pass in X0, Y0, but then you can do dot with on that instance, and then suddenly say dot with X1, and so the Y is still 0, and so you could do some tricks with that potentially.
Yeah,
matter in this case. It's kind of nice.
Yeah. Okay, so I ran the specs and it says undefined method enrichment, which that's, we didn't define it. Oh, sorry, enrich. Okay, so wait, so does that mean that with a data object we can't do this?
No, you can't do memorization because it's frozen.
It took 3 seconds.
That's the other thing too, like potentially, it's one of the things that's both like, again, the curse and the blessing of it, where like memorization is just done as a pattern if you're using these like data objects. But something that can also be interesting where it's like, well, because for me, some of what I've gotten into now is like, well, maybe that's actually okay to put into in the initialize, because we're going to call it anyway. And so that's going to be something that's going to get passed in, and then you do, what is it, at client equals, and then you call super, which is there when the freeze happens. But then you also have to define the initialize anyway. So it's like,
yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I follow. What do you think we should do in this case?
We can also just unroll it and not do it.
Right.
It's also fine. Yeah.
It also occurs to me that if you want another way, and I'm just reacting to this on the fly, it might encourage dependency injection too, like where we're actually passing in the client to use.
That's right. I've done that before too, where instead of then having the initialize do that work, you can then do what I said is the def self.build,
Mm-hmm.
and then that will then generate the client, and then you inject that into. And so clients are really supposed to call, or callers are really supposed to call build instead of new. That gives you a little bit of extra flexibility there.
That's interesting. Thanks for that insight. I think we should roll back.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. But at least I found that exercise interesting in my own code of like, oh, how many things are my memoization and like doing that with, and is that actually good or whatever, you know? But
Yeah, it's super valid, and it gives me something to think about for the future. Just gonna run the specs again.
because one thing I like about it when you then use that, like the inherits from the data, because like it is immediately clear what's going on in here. Of like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
this is a certain type of object that has all these constraints on it now. So it gives me already some clues like packed into one line of how this object is going to behave and what was like meant to be about it. Where
Right.
you know, this can do the same thing too, of course. But at least sometimes I find that's interesting and seeing what that sort of like has changed my thinking sometimes.
Yeah.
But then again, you know, it's not always the right thing for the right time. So
So I ran the specs and I was just about to plow forward and I realized, oh, that failure isn't the one that I expected. Um, and so Dyson says I would use data more if it was considerably faster than dynamic objects.
mm,
Because
I
it
think there's
is,
something where that's the cost of that freezing essentially
yeah,
what it
yeah.
does. It doesn't deep freeze, but I think there's something there where it's like it is also slightly slower than doing things manually. But for the most part, like I was saying in my case, I like that the intent revealing part of it more, and that will eat the cost essentially. But again, your miles may vary and all that stuff. So
So what I was saying is I realized from the spec failure that we never I didn't see a failure saying, "Hey, you know, you're not calling enrich," uh, or chat. You're just not getting the response, and that's because we didn't set up. We set up allows, but we didn't set up expectations that any of them were actually called. So we can check uh, whether it's gotten the arguments as we go here, but so now nothing is implemented the way that I would expect. So that's correct. Okay. Gonna have to. I'm realizing I had Copilot turned off apparently, so that's interesting. I just realized that I wasn't get like normally if I had Copilot turned on, I'd start to get suggestions for how to complete this, and I wasn't getting them, and I realized, oh, I have Copilot turned off. Let's keep on going with Copilot turned off just for fun. Okay. So it's parameters and the model messages tools. The format of the messages is an array. It can just be one message, but it's like this. So we can, so if we say, what is the, fine. So this is what we ultimately want it to do is say, oh, what I'm going to do is call a function and give that function all the information about the organization in a structured way. So what we would word this is populate the organization data for organization name. So we're essentially, in some ways, we're almost like we're tricking the LLM into thinking it's going to into thinking that it's going to do something. In reality, we actually are implementing exactly what we're doing. We're just telling the LLM, I have a function. I know how to take data you give me and populate the organization data. So we're telling it to do that. It's going to then figure out that how the information and then call the function to do it. So that's where the tools comes in, where we say tools. And a few weeks ago, I had the author of Active Agent, which is a Ruby gem for essentially providing a DSL for some of this that's in early development. So you're not having to type so many hashes. But so we have a type function, the name. No. The name of the function. Do you remember what we called it?
No, not really.
I think it was
like
enrich.
Is this enrich? Okay.
Organization. The description, and what we want to do here is tie it back to the way we asked. So it'll be like populates the data of an organization. And then the parameters, and what we're having here with the parameters is a JSON schema. So let's type object properties. And then we had we have founding date. Oh no, founded on is what we called it.
Adrian's saying in the chat, there's also a Ruby LLM gem, which is another growing alternative to AI provider specific clients. Okay. Cool.
Oh, yeah. We should look at that. Thanks, Adrian. We should look at that on a future stream. Actually, I haven't used that yet. And one of the reasons why I haven't is because the Ruby OpenAI gem actually can talk to multiple ones too. You just have to but it doesn't talk to all of them. And Ruby LLM is something to check out if you need to talk to something besides like a local Olama or that kind of thing. So this type, Kasper, is it just, can you do a JSON schema with it for a date?
I actually don't know. I think so.
Okay.
I don't know for sure, but yeah. I think that's one of the valid ones. Or does it need to be like, do you need to say ISO 8601 or?
I don't know. Does anybody in the chat know?
Oh, types just the keywords. Okay.
Array, Boolean, null, numeric types, object, regular expressions, string.
This is just a string then. I don't know what else we can give it. Interesting.
So let's do string. The what was it? ISO, what's the number?
8601.
8601, founding date of the company. I'm realizing we need to give it an option where that it can not provide it if it doesn't know it. But let's keep on moving forward so we can get to something working and demonstrate it. What was the other piece of information? Funding level.
Yeah. There's like a Dice in the chat saying, I can't remember Windows XP key, but I can't remember any ISO numbers. He's saying that's impressive.
Yeah.
But the reason I remember that is because I worked on global ID, which is what ActiveJob uses in the background to like serialize an active record and then find it again. So you don't have to do like post.find ID. And we added support for like signed global IDs where you can both embed like a purpose, and then there's also like an expires in, which then became a date. Because we want to serialize that, and that had to be like an ISO 8601. So that's why it's stuck in there. That's the whole thing about, I think in Ruby, the method is also XML schema. So you can call it on a date, and then you can pass in the amount of delimiters you want after the delimiter. So you could pass in 6, so you get 6, all the way down, which is important for like microseconds and things like that. So that's why it's like embedded, but it was like 11 years ago or something like that. It's just like stuck.
Okay, so we have the total amount of funding raised by the organization. Those are the two things we're expecting to be able to get a value of bootstrapped, which is interesting. Let's come back to that potentially. So here, okay, so we've chatted with the, we need to get the response from that. When we get the response, it's message. This says tool calls here, but I have a suspicion that that's not what it's actually called. Oops. I don't. So we know we only have one function, so and it's only gonna call the one. we should provide a tool choice required. That's going to force it to expect to call a function every single time. So that's forcing that. So in theory, so I don't know that let's see if our spec is going to pass. I don't know if it is. Undefined local variable or method organization name.
An instance variable. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We dropped the data object, so we didn't have that adder reader. I'll just fix it by adding the at for now. No implicit conversion of string into integer.
I guess the boilerplate response we added in the spec doesn't include that tool call. Or no, wait.
Yeah, and return. Yeah. So it was choices, 0 tool calls. Here, let's run the console. And let's actually run this. So I have it returning. I wanted to. So that it dug into that and got nil back.
Yeah.
I'm just going to have it return the full response so we can see what is actually being responded.
Probably to reload. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Where's
Okay,
this?
so
And 0.
Yeah, choices. Then that's an array, and we were getting the. Oh, let me put back what choices and 0, then message, then tool calls, and then the first one of those should give us that. So you can see what we're getting is founded on 2003 1205, which is interesting. Funding level not publicly disclosed. So it is working, like in terms of responding with the structured data that we wanted. So let me reload now. I put that back.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we want to get.
Oh, now it only returned the founded on. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And
it's different.
the right date. Different date. Yeah.
Different date. Closer.
It's
getting
there.
closer. And then if we say arguments, that's going to give us the JSON. So to get that to be a Ruby hash. No implicit conversion of nil into string. Oh, it's not. It's function arguments. Okay. It's a different date every single time. That's closer.
Yeah, it's getting there. Yeah.
It's one day off. That's funny. The year was right every single time. So maybe we do end up just with a year all the time. Okay, so we got the format of the hash we're getting back right. I think so now if we run our spec again, I think our setup was probably not correct anymore. Boy, this is quite the long dig here.
Yeah.
And now I'm starting to become crestfallen as I need to write the hash the other way. Okay, it was an array.
Yep. The hash with messages in there.
And then an array.
Another hash. No, I think another hash. The
You're
tool
right.
calls in there, and then an array.
Does this work to give me a string?
No, it'll do technically a quoted symbol. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and that's an array. We're not even checking. The only thing we actually need here is okay. I think we're giving the right format here. Undefined local variable or method response.
Yeah. Okay.
I kept my cheat sheet up at the top. So
strings and symbols, yeah.
Isn't there like
yeah, there's symbolized names.
Symbolized names or symbolized keys?
I think it's symbolized names. Could be wrong.
Not that I don't believe you.
Oh, you're searching on dig? I mean, for JSON parse.
Sorry, it's JSON. It's I put the place in the wrong thing and then got myself confused. You were right. You were right. Forgive me.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see at the end of the stream.
Symbolize names, and then we were so this is a parsed date the expectation that we set up. don't actually feel. I don't know how to. I don't know that's much more processing than we're set up to handle right here in a clean
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Let's just put it to the string for right now, especially as I glance at the clock.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay. So now, we could so to ask it to start populating other things, we have a single place where we can do that. We just describe the additional attributes that we want to get. So it would be like uh location, and you just say what that data should be. So it would be the this actually doesn't really matter to us anymore in the world of remote, where we're fully remote. And it used to be that we had offices in different cities, and so knowing that would be nice. What's another one of the pieces of information we had?
Annual revenue, total funding. Yeah. Latest funding round.
Oh,
Okay.
industry.
Stage.
Industry is a good one. So for industry, this is where we know that we have the string is a type, but it's an, I forget the syntax for this off the top of my head, to say
I
like
think it
here are
was
the
in the
possible values for it.
right. I think it was an array. I think it was in the OpenAI documentation. There's an example of that somewhere. Yeah, right there. Enum, Celsius, Fahrenheit, unit.
Yeah, okay. Type string enum. Yeah. So I was on the right track. I'm going over here because I think
Yeah,
we
just
might
grab it.
have. Oh no. This is the ones that is a mapping of the ones in our CRM, to the ones provided by Fresh Sales. It's not a clean of a. But we can do Fresh Sales Industries keys to see how it responds.
Oh, and yeah.
Let's go over to the console now and. Yeah, cool. That's as right as it could possibly be for right,
Yeah,
aside
yeah.
from the date. Well, if we change it to founding year, ooh. So the way to solve for that is we add, I believe it's required, I just want to go over to the required strings of the locations in an array. I should do it. Oh, it returned Bootstrap as the funding level. That's interesting.
Oh, well. Yeah.
So now by making those properties required, it's forcing the LLM to respond with a value for each of them.
Mm.
It's interesting. I'm calling it multiple times, and you can see it's Bootstrap private, Bootstrap undisclosed, and it's returning with city state, and then the next 3 times just the city, and then software consulting software. So it's much less. So one thing I know for sure is when you call Apollo, it's pulling it from a database that it has, and so you get the same response every time. It's much more deterministic than that. I guess it's up to us to decide whether this is better or not. Okay. So that's the strategy for how to get that structured information back from an LLM, how to do required in the JSON schema to make sure you get your fields filled out all the time. We didn't get to what I was saying is, you want to make sure that you are giving the LLM an out so that it doesn't make up information, and usually giving an unknown option or being able to say, like, give me the confidence level for each of these things. And so that allows it to basically say, like, my confidence level is 0. And that's a good indicator that it might be making it up. We promised the good people, and I promised you ActiveJob, looking at ActiveJob performs. So let's go all the way back up to the opportunity job, our opportunity processor. And so I think this is a decent candidate. Why don't we start by get in your own words, like where did ActiveJob performs come from for you?
Yeah, so it came out at like a place of basically came out with another gem I was also doing. Like it's trying to find a little bit more structure to Rails apps where like, on inside of Rails core, there isn't a whole lot of opinions about modeling except like do concerns, use callbacks, all that stuff. And it's like, well, a lot of teams are struggling with that. And then people are doing a whole bunch of services, which is also fine as well. But then there's also kind of tough to, at least for me sometimes, like it gets really unstructured really fast. So I was doing a gem called active record associated object, where you kind of borrow, it's essentially a poro that you nestle within an active record to give it a little bit more structure. And then inside of there, I was having these poros then respond to global IDs interface so they could be passed to jobs because they're just using like post.find ID1. So I'm just borrowing the post's global ID, but pointing it to a different class. It was like, so springing out of that, I was then like, wait, what if I just automated some of that all the job boilerplate essentially. I got an example in the README, I think, if you want to find that. Actually, it's on my GitHub. It might be easier. Yeah, github.com/caspth, and then active_job dash performs. Yeah, there it is. Basically, you pass a symbol to performs, and it'll generate all the stuff you see below. And it's trying to elevate a pattern that's within Rails itself. You've got like action mailbox, it's got like a process and then a process later. And then there's also action mailer has got deliver and then deliver later. So there's sort of a pattern of calling, so the jobs will then call an instance method that's named the same. So in this case, you basically have a publish later method that then will call publish on it and forward some of that up. So it gives a little bit more structure to it. And that's at least the attempt. And it'll also let you do stuff like just the, I think it's on 7.1 or whatever, there's perform all later. You can push bulk those jobs as well to get a little bit of an extra interface on that, just to give a little bit more structure and a little bit of that feeling of that convention, essentially.
So in the case of this opportunity processor, I think the name would need to change to, but that would be, we would be introducing a method here that is, well, we could do enrichment, or we could do basically process, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And we could say, as it performs.
You could basically prefix the method as well, because Ruby will return, like when you do def process, it'll return a symbol with that name. You basically say process right before def right there. Oh, sorry, performs. So you can kind of get it down to a one-liner, which is kind of nuts in a way.
Wait, say that, or you want to, if you.
Hold on, let me see if I can. Where's the grab to keyboard thing? How do I do? This is the mouse. Which way? Is it this one I need to talk?
Yeah.
Right here, I think. Do I have it? No. Well, that was you can basically just before def, you can say performs def process, because Ruby will return a symbol when you do def. It will return a symbol. Yeah, exactly. And then it's not a symbol, but then.
And then this is not a symbol.
Return a symbol. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You get a whole
so def returns a symbol of the method name.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. Okay.
But this is also why you could do like where you got performance right, and you could also say private, because private takes a symbol, so you can kind of prefix it like that as well. You could also chain it, because I think performance also return. I made performance also return symbols. You do private performance def or whatever, just to keep it going. Yeah. But and then so the idea was to have something that's more conventional around, like it makes it a little bit tougher to grep for things where it's defined and whatnot. But the idea was to, if you think of it more as like an organizational pattern to use throughout your app, then it would kind of make sense, because you know what it means and what to look for when you see like process later somewhere else, or process later bulk or whatever. That was kind of the idea for it. And then giving it a lot more structure to like how the internal structure works, and it's like generating a lot of boilerplate, so you don't have like basically a lot of, I think it's a Kent Beck line or whatever. A thing that I tend to look for a lot is like what is it, make similar things more similar and make dissimilar things more dissimilar. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do, a lot of trying to figure out, okay, can we make this, if we squint a little bit, can we turn this into kind of a pattern? And then if we try to shift some of the things over to use that pattern, we'll have slimmed the app a little bit, and then the things that don't fit that pattern stand out more. That's kind of the process I'm trying to do, kind of.
Cool. Well, if that is interesting to folks, definitely check out that gem, ActiveJob performs. So to wrap up, we've got a class now which provides a foundation for enriching, providing enrichment data for our company. I think we need to evaluate the results we're getting, tweak it a little bit more to remove some of that uncertainty. But results so far are promising. And the thing that one of the reasons why I think an LLM approach is promising is that we can also ask the LLM to like give a brief summary description of what the company does, or those kinds of things, and that's not necessarily something that like those other services do. Like, to be able to really generate more dynamic stuff. So we'll continue to explore this. But Kasper, thanks for joining me and working through this problem together. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Thanks for having me. This is great. Yeah.
So again, you're running that workshop next week. Sorry, is it next week?
Yeah. Next Wednesday. Yeah.
So definitely check that out. I am doing the show again next week, next Thursday, same time. Ferdia, a designer at Thoughtbot, is running another live stream tomorrow, more on the sort of business and product aspects of AI. So if and he's based in Ireland, so that's a little bit earlier in the day for folks. You can check all those things on the schedule or our YouTube where you're watching this. Casper, where can folks find you online? If
I'm a Blue Sky. I'm on, get up Casp TH everywhere pretty much. Luma stat as well. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at these days.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for
See you
having me.
later,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thanks for watching, everybody. See ya.